Father God, again, we thank you for being a great God. We thank you for your books and enlightening us with who you are. So, Father, again, we'd ask that I would teach well, that the text would open up well, that we would understand it, that we'd be moved by it, that we would see your plan and just be encouraged to turn our face towards Jerusalem and keep doing the work till the end. So inspire us, I pray, in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay, so while we're just waiting to get settled in, why does David name all the animals? That was on last week's papers, but I forgot to mention. Why does David name the animals?
Adam.
Thank you. Why does Adam? Okay. Ooh, good. All right, let's start over. Here we go. Here's the question of the week. Why does Adam...
I thought it was a test.
Yeah, you passed the first one. Why does Adam name the animals? Or rather, why does God have Adam name the animals? He doesn't name all the trees. Why does he name all the animals?
I'm trying to find a partner.
Partially. More important than that. Who is Adam? And?
King.
King. He's priest and king. What do all the kings do in all the Old Testament stories? Why do we call Daniel Daniel?
The king renamed it.
Yes, Nebuchadnezzar gave him a name. Why do we call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Who named them? So the list, if you look at last week's, I gave a whole list. Moses and Esther and those guys, and the list goes on and on. Like, we don't know that. I looked in that. We don't even really have a tradition. But clearly, yeah, that's not what she names in Moses, right? Drawn out. But that's not what he would have had a name before that, right? They raised him. She hid him as long as she could, and then we're never told. It's pretty interesting.
Probably called him Sue.
Yeah. So kings demonstrate their authority by naming. This is it's in tons of Bible stories. If God is saying, Adam, you're a king, then God has to let him name the animals. That's the only thing there is to name. And Adam has to do it, right? This is his job. But it's not just, oh, there's nothing to do, let's just have Adam, have him name things. Like, no. This is a very specific role of a king. Everything, have dominion over them, right? How are you going to demonstrate dominion, right? When you buy a dog, you don't just let it live in your house and never name it. It isn't just yeah, it's not just you don't want just a wild animal living in your house. No, you're going to show dominion over it. You're going to name it. You're going to give it rules. You're going to instruct it. That's naming. This is what naming does. It's still part of it. So anyhow, that's a little point. Here's where we're headed today. We're going to look at shadows in Genesis, and by shadows I mean foreshadows. And here's the big idea. I want to see shadows in the text for lots of reasons. One of those is I want to see one author. I want to see one author, right? I'm not a huge reader, but I listen to tons of books, and the best books, the best authors have all kinds of foreshadows in the early chapters. When you don't know it reading it the first time, right? But once you get familiar, if you read a book a second time, you go, oh my gosh, there's so much information laid down in that first chapter. Like, you can't believe it. You're like, man, I thought that stuff came out way later. But it demonstrates one author, right? That's why a different person can't generally finish a book well if they didn't write it. Like, here, put the ending into my book. Well, it's hard. But if it's one author, that's really true. If the Bible was written primarily through the inspiration of God, which isn't just sitting there remotely like this, right? It's a nuanced God working in your spirit, but also studying the text. The New Testament authors are quoting the Old Testament like crazy and making allusions to it like crazy because they're students of the Word, right? So inspiration isn't generally, it could have been anyone. They didn't even have to know God. He just needed someone's hand to write on the paper. No. That's the wrong idea of it. But what they're inspired to write, and it's all over the text, right? The New Testament's going to call the ark a picture. David is going to write Psalm 22 about feeling oppressed and feeling like he's surrounded by dogs and feeling like his bones are dried out and his tongue is sticking to the roof of his mouth because he's so... But it turns out that it's an actual prophecy of Jesus, right? Jesus quotes essentially the whole psalm from the cross. But David's writing a shadow. He doesn't know it, but he's compelled. So I want to see that because I want to see one author, right? I also want to see tons of shadows because I want to see the trajectory. I want to see one plan of God, right? I want to see a plan, and I want to see the plan laid out. I'm not that comfortable with God, like, oh, never mind, nothing to see here, never mind, let's go this way for a while. Like, oh wait, that's not going to work out, let's go this way. No, I want to see a plan of God that he's starting something and finishing it. I want to rely on promises. I want to see a storyline, and I want that storyline to build pretty early, right? Pretty early. Any good novel, the basic storyline's right in the opening. It's supposed to capture you. So I want to see that. When Paul writes, who's got a Bible? Ephesians 1:4. What does it say? I have the reference here. When Paul writes Ephesians 1:4, when Paul writes Ephesians 5 and talks about husbands and wives, we're going to look at that this morning, or tonight, and says, I'm not talking about husbands and wives, I'm really talking about Jesus and the church. Like, where does he get that? Like, where does he get off to compare me and a bride to Jesus and the church? Like, he isn't pulling that out of thin air, right? When Peter says that Christ was predestined, when he was foreordained before the creation of the earth, and God waited till now to reveal him, what does Peter mean? When Peter says, what does Ephesians 1:4 say?
1:5?
No,
4. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ.
Okay, before the creation of the earth. Before the creation of the earth, Peter says Christ is ordained. And Paul says before the creation of the earth, God already had a plan that those who would be in Christ would be holy and blameless. Like, okay, if that's true, then well, first off, where do they get that? Because where would you go if you're going to say, before the creation of the earth? Like, you're going to have to pull those ideas right out of Genesis 1 and 2. Because by the time you get to chapter 3, Adam's already in sin. And here's the question. Is the gospel something that happens after Adam sins? Is the whole plan of the Bible after man's sin? And that's not my first point, but they don't seem to think so. They're saying this was the plan before man sinned. Well, did God need man to sin? God required it because that's the whole trajectory. Paul's going to argue no. No, we did not have to sin. And the plan would have still worked. I want to see all those shadows. I want to see it all because they're pulling it from somewhere, right? They're students. They're learning. They're reading. They're people of the text. But why use shadows? It's kind of an interesting subject. Why use shadows at all? Or foreshadows? Why use them? Why not just tell us directly? Why not just say, chapter 1, here's the big picture. Here's the plan. This is where we're at. All right, here's the plan. That's where we're going to end up. Here it is. My side or my enemy. What do you want? Why not do that? Why use so many shadows? Because the Bible's, it's just chock full of them. It's just chock full of them. Every single chapter, every single thing is a shadow. Like, it's all part of one story, right? This is how we talk about the Bible. One book, one story telling us something. All the characters are kind of aiming us in it. Why do shadows? It's funny, Paul actually tells us why God used shadows. It's an interesting thing, and we don't tend to think about it. And here it is, I'll tell you, and then I'll show you where Paul says it. So, God has an enemy, right? That's part of the big picture. God has an enemy who's trying to actually defeat the purposes of God. Is that right? You agree with that? Yeah, right? So there it is. God has an enemy. And every single time, God overtly tells somebody a plan, Satan tries to disrupt that plan. He tries to throw the whole thing overboard, right? And I put a ton of examples of that. Adam, son of God, created to be my priest and king. Here comes the snake, right? Here's the snake's leading Adam astray, right? We're going to defeat that plan. Why? Because they're the fallen sons of God. This is their plan. They're going to wreak havoc. This is the counsel of God in Psalm 82 when God says, why don't you guys knock it off? Why don't you join the right team and stop leading people astray? You're going to pay for it one day, right? Psalm 82. But they come in and right off the get-go, here's my plan, here's my man. Okay, I'm going to corrupt him. The new righteous line starts. And so Cain and Abel, and then Seth, we have a new righteous line. Genesis 6, the sons of God come in and try to pervert the genealogy of mankind, whatever that whole story is about, crazy. God calls Abraham and says, through you, I'm going to bless the whole world. And before Abraham has a son, his descendant is Lot, right? That's his nephew, that's as close as he has. And right away, they go. God starts blessing him, and Lot gets captured. We're going to work against that plan. I'm going to take the descendant away, right? I'm going to take the descendant away. God tells Abraham, listen, I'm going to give you the promised land, and it's going to happen in how long? 400 years from now. I'm going to give all of this land to your descendants. But first, I'm going to put them in Egypt. They're going to be in Egypt for a while. But then in 400 years, I'm going to get them out of there, and I'm going to bring them here. What happens in 400 years? What happens in Egypt 400 years later? Pharaoh starts killing all the male babies off. Why? How is that part of the story? What is theoretically happening? He's trying to kill God's enemies. God overtly told the plan, and Satan goes, I know the plan. I'll defeat that, right? And it happens every single time. So he starts killing all the babies off. The Messiah is going to come through the Davidic line. And then right after Solomon, Solomon, the whole nation of Israel splits. 10 tribes go north and 2 stay south. The 10 tribes of God's people are now the enemies of the 2, and they war. They're not fighting enemies. They're fighting Israel. Israel is their enemies. What? I know the plan. He said the plan. It's coming through David. Okay, I will take your own people and I will crush that plan. Right? And then the Davidic line even goes away. Right? Babylon comes and captures Judah. And what happens to all the line of David, all the young men? Who grabs them up? Nebuchadnezzar. And what does he do with them all? He castrates them all. Right? And then the line goes dead, right? Literally, the line goes dead. Like, okay, I know the line. I'm going to work against the line. Daniel gives us a basic timeline of when the Messiah is going to come. Revelation 12 says, listen, Satan, read it, the woman was about to give birth, and Satan took a third of the angels down, and he waited in anticipation for the child to be born so he could kill him. Right? Satan knows the timeline. It's blatant in Revelation 12. He's sitting, drooling, waiting for a baby to come out so he could kill the thing. What happens when Jesus is born? Why did they leave? Because they were scared. Oh, it's time for the Messiah. It's time to kill the babies, right? Time to kill the babies. The plan is up. Messiah Satan doesn't give up. He's trying to kill Jesus the whole time. He actually does kill Jesus on the cross, right? He actually does it. Look at 1 Corinthians, look at the top of page 2. And this is a very interesting verse. It's a very interesting verse. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through 8. We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age, or of the rulers of this age. Who does Paul call the rulers? Are they generally humans in Paul's language? Your struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the principalities, right? The powers, the rulers of this dark world. Satan is the ruler of the kingdom of the air. Not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age. Like, we're not on the bad side, the bad team, Satan's team, who are coming to nothing, right? The kingdom of God is here, and we're defeating the kingdom of darkness. That's not humans are coming to nothing. He's not talking about Caesar's death. No, we declare God's wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden, that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it. If they had, they would not have killed the Messiah.
Right, he had to die.
He had to die. And Satan, if God knew Jesus was going to come and die on a cross for our sin, if it just said it plainly, Satan would know the plan. And then Satan wouldn't, in Revelation 12, be waiting for the baby to kill him. No, that is the plan. He's got to die. Well, then we're going to protect him. That guy's going to die of old age. If anyone is going to die of old age, it's going to be Jesus. Why? Because the plan's to kill him. So, find me really super clear text in the Old Testament where the suffering Messiah is the Messiah and he's going to die for the sin of the world. Right? That's hidden. Paul says it's hidden. Paul tells us why it's hidden. Because we needed Jesus to die. When God overtly states the plan, Satan works against it. So there's a whole subline plot through the Bible that's been hidden so that it would work out. Because it seems like Satan knows the plan directly, but he doesn't have the wisdom to sit and study it and be inspired and understand the shadows. Paul says. Yeah, crazy. Weird, right? Okay, so let's look at some shadows.
Does that imply that man right now is wiser than Satan? And we're sitting here studying, trying to see the shadows, and Satan could.
Without question. We have the mind of Christ.
So,
right? We have the mind of Christ.
plus, you
Can't
remember
be said of Satan.
when you said, when he was creating it, and he saw that it was good, and it was not wishing God, seeing the end factor.
Yeah.
So, you knew the end was, the plan worked.
Yep.
Basically.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Exactly right. Now I want to see all of that. I want to see all of that in all the stories. When Jesus walks on the Emmaus Road and says, listen, our hearts were, on fire because he was just walking us through the text, showing us how all the texts from Moses through the prophets were all about him, right? What does that mean? Yeah. All right, so let's look. Okay, so the river is, it's just the thing I want to point out. So I wanted to point out that David names the animals because he's king. That kind of verifies what we're saying. He's king. The river kind of... Adam, not David. All right, hopefully that doesn't go on the whole night. The river, again, I want to point out to you. So Alan brought this up, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's look into that a little bit. Again, I want to just point out the river and say, listen, the way the river is described is also verifying that Eden is the temple of God, right? So the Eden, it says this in Genesis 2:10. I'm on the middle of page 2. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden, and there it was separated into 4 headwaters. All right. So here's what it's described. And I did tons of Google research on it. So yeah, it's weird. Okay, so here's the picture. here's Eden, right? And here's the Garden of Eden. Here's the Garden of Eden. And there's a river, a single river, coming down into Eden, into the garden. And then here it's going to separate into 4 headwaters. What's a headwater of a river? It's the beginning of it. It's the beginning of it. If there's a river going to another river, is that the headwater? Nope, the river's somewhere else, right? So this technically, these are not headwaters because there's a whole river up, right? Also, a garden is, again, this is a mountain. Where are headwaters? Are headwaters in valleys? No, they're not. No. The Amazon headwater is 5,000 feet higher than the Amazon River. The Platte River is like 3,000 something feet higher in, the Colorado mountains. The Nile River is like, the Mississippi River is 1,500 feet higher up in Minnesota, right? You need headwaters and it's all streams, and then they gather all together, and then they turn into a river, and then they go downstream. This is headwaters are in the garden. What does that tell you about the garden?
It's on top.
It's a mountain. Can't have headwaters in a valley. So again, but it's described as a valley. But it's described as a mountain too because it's the headwaters. But it's not the headwaters because there's a magic river that's coming. Where is the top of that one? There's already a river. It has to have headwaters itself. It also has to have a bunch of streams and turn into a river. So these aren't rightfully called headwaters, and we're not even told where this one is. But if this is a temple, and it goes in 4 directions, what's interesting about 4 directions? What would it would imply? So this is also in lots of commentaries. It would imply it's trying to give the imagery. It's trying to give the imagery as the Garden of Eden is the center of the world. Right? It's the center of the world. This river is probably coming from heaven, right? From God, and it's watering Eden, and there it's going to bring life into the whole world. 4 rivers are going to leave, and life is going to extend out, and that's why Adam is supposed to keep expanding Eden, because he's going to find the river and life there as he goes. So I'm not saying they're not real. That's not what I'm saying. It's the temple of God. You should expect that. But you should expect it because that's how it's always described. Look at the magic river in, so drop down, right? Look at the bottom of page 2, Isaiah 41. Here's what God says in Isaiah 41. I will make rivers flow on barren heights and springs within the valleys. I will turn the desert into pools of water and the parched ground into springs. I will make rivers flow on barren heights, right? This is not, no, you can have headwaters on the top of mountains, but you can't have rivers on top of mountains. That's not how it works. Where are they coming from? So right in commentaries, here's an NIV commentary. It's one of my primary ones I use. And it was talking about, that's weird, and it says, yet this God, who is not part of the cosmos, and thus not captive to it, Genesis 1, right, transcendent, can do what is new and unheard of. Like, it doesn't matter, this is God talking. Can God make a river on top of a mountain if he wants? Yes, he can. Can he be saying something different at the same time? Yes, of course he can. If you look at Ezekiel 47, this is the millennial kingdom, right? The millennial kingdom. Look at the river in this chapter. The man brought me back to the entrance of the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east. So there's a leak inside the temple. And it's, what's the threshold? What's a threshold? The doorway, right? So if we were sitting here and then all of a sudden water was creeping in that door right there, right? Would it be wetter in here or where it started? Where it started, right? That's how leaks happen, water creeping up. It's not how this river works. Water coming out from under the threshold in the temple. Do you think the temple in the millennial kingdom actually has a leak? No, probably not. Because the temple faced east, yeah, we know that because Eden faces east, right? He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside of the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. So it's trickling. He measured off 1,000 cubits. That's this far, so that's like 300 yards, right? He measured off 1,000 cubits and then led me to water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 300 yards, and it led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me to water through water that was waist deep. He measured off another 1,000, and now it was a river that no one, drop down to the last sentence, that no one could cross. So there's water trickling under that door right there, and within 1,000 yards, it's a river no one can cross. Is that a real river? Do rivers work that way? No. They don't work that way. They do not work that way. But look what it says. Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, the water flows toward the eastern region where it enters the Dead Sea. When it enters into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. So is this the river of life? Possibly. But the swarms and marshes will not become fresh. That's kind of weird. They will be left for salt. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Now look at this. The leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit. Is that how trees work? Trees don't work that way. Because rivers don't work this way. What's going on here? Look at the very last sentence. Why does it all work this way?
It's water from the sanctuary flows.
Because it's water from the sanctuary. It's water from the sanctuary. So if this river is from the sanctuary and it's flowing here, it can turn into headwaters because God can do that. And it can go out and be the river of life to the whole world. Right? Because it's the temple of God. It doesn't have the same rules. Right? It's not just an actual location on the planet. It is an actual location. It has actual rivers. These are them. But it's also actually the temple of God. And so you should expect wonders, right? It's wonders when we get to heaven. Look at Revelation. Again, it's going to sound very much like Ezekiel. But a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Highly debated. What does that mean, right? No more salt water, no more oceans, only rivers. Is it not talking water at all? Is it talking people? Is it talking different nationalities? A lot of debate. Then the angel showed me a river of the water of life. Oh, now it actually has a name. The water of life. As crystal, as clear as crystal, flowing from, now it's coming right out of the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street. If its headwater is the throne of God, where is God's throne? It's on top of a mountain, right? It's the mount of God. It always is the mount of God. It always is. Gods live on mountains. Down the middle of the great street, on each side of the river, stood a tree of life bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. Is that how it works? No. Is that how it works in the temple of God? Yes. Yes. Eden has this same kind of idea. A river that makes no sense. A river that doesn't have a beginning flows and turns into headwaters. It's just, that's bizarre. And then they go off in 4 ways, right? They go off in 4 ways. Why? Because that's supposed to give you the idea. Like, it's watering everything. This is where life is coming from on the planet. When Eden is on there, life is going to come out of there. It's the river of life. All right, that really isn't part of it. It'll show up a little bit. I just wanted to bring that up to demonstrate, yes, temple. It's very temple-ish. It's very temple-ish. Now, let's put our brains on. Shadows. Where's the first gospel in the Bible? Don't look at your notes. Try not to look at your notes today. I want them all to be a surprise.
Is it the animals, when he clothed them in skin and sacrificed the animals and covered them?
Okay, so most people are going to go to that or one a little before that. So he said the sacrifice, and Adam is covered, right? I'm going to cover you. And that idea is all the way through. So we are clothed or covered in Christ. That's clearly a gospel show. Some people will jump a little ahead of that.
When you crush the...
That's right, the promise of 3:15. Almost everyone's going to say 3:15, and that's where I will crush his head, right? He'll bite my heel, but I'm going to crush his head. This is the promise. This is the promise, the plan. Here's the problem with both of those ideas, and it's a big problem. It's a giant theological problem because it requires it requires the gospel to need the fall of man. It needs the fall of man. What was the point of Adam before the fall? What was the point? He could have been alive for who knows how many thousands of years before he sinned, right? He has to fail pretty bad. That doesn't happen instantly. Right? You're a newbie, you're living for God, you're naming things, you're king for a while. And then life gets boring. And then you're no longer that good at the king. And then you're not that good of a husband after a while. Right? But that takes time. It takes time. We don't know how long that was. No point in Adam? God's just, come on, eat the freaking tree already. We're going to get on with the plan. Eat the tree. Eat the tree. Is that it? No, I want to see it before the fall. I want the fall, I really want the fall, to just be like Adam or Abraham giving Sarai away. Like, you're going to have a son, it's going to be through Sarai. Okay, Sarai, let's go on vacation to Egypt. Oh yeah, by the way, you look great in a bikini, and other people are going to want you. And just say it's okay, it's fine. Like, God has to overcome that. I want to see the snake come in the garden and in the fall of man just be like God saying, oh no, that's not going to interrupt the plan. I have a plan. We're going somewhere. And even this will not throw it off. Even though death has entered into the human race, death cannot defeat the plan of God. I want the gospel before the fall.
Would it be the resurrection that brings them out of it?
Ooh, I love that word. We're going to hit that word. We're going to hit that word, but not yet, not yet.
What about just God just hovering over everything?
Yeah, sure, I think everything's a picture. So could you guys find pictures that I'm going to go, oh, I like that one? Yes, you can, because I love pictures. But I got text. Ephesians 5. Look what Paul does. Look down. Ephesians 5, 25 through 32. Paul is actually going to tell us. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church. Is Paul giving marital advice? Yeah, he is. He is. Is that all Paul is saying? No, it's not. As a radiant church, but he's talking about what Jesus did, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies, just as Christ does the church, for we're members of his body. He's going to now quote Genesis chapter 2, and he's going to say, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. And now look what Paul says. This is a profound mystery. And I'm not talking about, but I am talking about Christ and the church. This is a profound mystery. What is that verse? It's a profound mystery. It is not a profound mystery that husbands should love their wives. That's not a profound mystery. Why is that a profound mystery? That's not profound at all. It's not a profound mystery that wives should submit to their husbands, especially in that culture. Like now it's a little bit of a mystery, but it wasn't then. Like that's not profound in any way. Here's a profound mystery. Genesis 2, they will become one flesh. And that sentence right there, they will become one flesh, is ultimately about Christ and the church. That's the plan. That's the gospel. There it is. Before the fall. There it is. Paul puts it right there. You want to know what the whole plan was? Why didn't God just tell us the plan? Because Satan would know the plan. Satan would know the plan. So I'm going to couch it that the two will become one flesh. Oh, Bruce, you're stretching that. Well, that's what Paul does with it. What does Jesus do with it? Jesus does it way better than Paul. Look what Jesus does with it. Right at the bottom of this page. This is his prayer. His one prayer for you. He had one prayer for you. And it's written down. My prayer is not for them alone, meaning his disciples. He prayed for them in the beginning of chapter 17. Now he's praying about us. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. That's us. Yeah. We're down the line. That all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe you have sent me. Here's the plan. The two are going to become one flesh. And Jesus' prayer is that we become one, not with each other, with him. Marriage is a picture. Marriage is a shadow. That's why it's important to stay faithful. Because you're a shadow. You're not the real thing. You're not the plan. Jesus and man, Jesus and humans are the plan. Marriage itself is a shadow of Christ and the church, of God and people. He goes on. I'll let you talk in a second. I have given them the glory you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them, and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Look where Jesus goes with it. Look at the last highlighted bit. Before the creation of the world. Before the fall, this was the plan. Here it is. Oneness, sharing of glory, sharing of space, sharing of intimacy. It gets a little weird when you think of it in that way, because Jesus says, I don't know, I might have just a terrible brain, but me and them and me, and I go, oh, you're getting a little intimate for me, right? You're getting a little creepy. No! One flesh! Like, really, like, no, way beyond creepy. Like, if you stop at a sexual image or a marriage intimacy, you're way too shallow, like, way beyond that. A oneness that you can't even imagine. That's where I'm headed. Where did that first come out? Why is Eve taken out of man? That's not so men and women could be equal on this planet. That's simple-minded. It's a shadow. That we're the oneness that us in Christ are supposed to have. That you and I will have with God. Go to Revelation. And God is with his people, and his people love him and serve him, and it's never night, and it's never dark. And his glory that he's sharing with them lights the space, and it's always, and the kings bring in their blessing, and God is with them. And it's trying to talk about a oneness that we can't get a hold of. That's before the fall.
Where's the text in Genesis that says that?
That's, I didn't write the reference. What is that? Genesis 2 what? And the two will become one flesh. Like, that's going to be
24.
224.
224.
So it's when, you're saying it's when God makes Eve,
Yeah.
basically is the gospel picture.
Yes, and he said,
That's the
Adam
picture.
said,
It's the picture. And so even in Paul, so the first half, so it's two halves, right? So you could be like, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Fine, that's the human relationship. But the gospel, and the two will become one flesh. And the two will become one. This was the easy one. If Genesis 2, if the primary interpretation of this is marriage, man and wife, if this is primary, then it's only kind of a coincidence that Jesus is modeling marriage, right? Then if marriage is primary, then Jesus is modeling marriage. If Christ in the church is primary, then marriage is a shadow of that, right? And Paul's going to say, okay, what's primary? Is what God is doing, is there marriage in heaven? Not if you're going to go by Jesus, right? Not if you're going to go in that, not in the strict sense. For sure, you can't do that, right? There's no giving or being given in heaven, Jesus says, right? So it's something, it's different, there's something, but it's different. Is Christ in the church, is that eternal? That one's primary. That one's eternal. That's the storyline. The storyline is not, and I'm going to make males and females and they're going to have sex. Like, that's the storyline. That's not the storyline. That's not the storyline. That goes away. Sex ends.
I see it.
Christ in the church is eternal. That's the eternal story. There's tons of shadows of that. One of them is brotherly love. Right? He's our brother. Brotherly love. Marriage. Oneness. One body. One team. Co-workers. Marriage. Those are all just pictures. That's why you can interchange them. If marriage was primary, then you don't get to change that. You can't change this into, oh, we're one body. And we're brothers. Because now that's weird, right? You don't have sex with yourself, and you don't have sex with your brother. Like, these are the rules, right? These are the rules. Well, you can't interchange the pictures. But you can if the oneness of, if it's Christ in the church. Oh, two C's. If it's Christ in the church, if that one's primary, then you can use all those, because they are the shadows. But if they're the shadows, then Genesis 2 is primary. The two will become one flesh. Even if it's just marriage there, it's still a shadow. It's still a foreshadow of something bigger that's going to happen.
Well, what's interesting is even in Genesis 2, before he created Eve, well, as part of the story he created Eve is if we're in Christ and Christ is in us, how he creates Adam, but then he also takes Eve straight from Adam.
Yeah.
He's
already
brought Adam
in.
from him,
Yeah.
and then he's then taken Eve from Adam.
Yeah. That's right. It's all there. It's all there. It really is. And why is it there? Because it's one author, and the plan is before the fall. It's not a waste of time. This is the huge sin of Adam. The goal of however many, if it was years, if it was 5,000 years, if it was 50,000 years, however long Adam and Eve had with walking with God in the garden, the goal was oneness. Not just one Adam and Eve and God just out here. No, it was oneness with God. That was gospel. That was, God was living in heaven, if you will, in quotes, with Adam before he fell. He's not waiting for him to fall. He's waiting for Adam to embrace oneness with him. And what is Adam doing? He's getting farther and farther away. He's getting farther and farther away. And that's the story of the Bible. And God says, you can run, but I'm going to call you back. I'm going to work in you, and I'm going to call you back. And it's a shadow. Even Adam's walking away until he falls and then gets kicked out is precisely the story of Israel. It's a shadow of what Israel's going to do. He's going to take them and he's going to put them in the land of flowing milk and honey, and they're going to be his people, and I will be your God. And then what do? They slowly start walking away, and then they get kicked out of the promised land. And what does God say? Don't worry, I'm going to call you back. Right? Adam, the whole life story of Adam is just the story of Israel, which is the story of the world, which God says, no, the plan is one day we're going to be one. And Adam can slowly walk away and fail and get kicked out. Israel can slowly walk away, fail, and get kicked out. The church can slowly walk, the world itself can slowly walk away and fail. Paul says before the end there'll be a great falling away. Revelation 21 and 22 ends with us one with God. Jesus triumphs because it's declared in 2:20 something. This is the plan. Oneness. And I'm not going to lose. That's amazing. In Adam's life of walking away and falling and getting kicked out is repeated again and again through the Bible. So the transcendent God of Genesis 1 isn't taken by surprise that his plan is going to go south with Adam, any more than his plan is surprised that Israel fails. In Deuteronomy, Moses says to the Israelites, listen, you're going to get to the promised land, you're going to be blessed, and you're going to forget all about God, and you're going to fall away, and you're going to turn to other gods. Why would he say that? He doesn't say you might. He says you are going to do. Here's the path you're on. It's before the golden calf.
Oh, he tells them that before? I was just thinking maybe because of the violence.
Maybe not. Maybe not. He might, no. Golden calf's pretty freaking early. So probably not. Deuteronomy is going to come after that. But he's going to do it before they even get to the promised land, though. Like, how does he know what's going to happen? It's the story of Adam. Adam, God put him in the garden, and he flourished. And then he got used to flourishing. And what happened when he got used to flourishing? He started walking away from God. And he turned to other gods. Right? He stopped worshiping God, started worshiping self and the creation, snakes and the creation, and he got kicked out. This is the pattern. Moses knows it's a pattern. He can just say it to Israel. Listen, this is what blessing does. Right? Picture. First one. The first one is, so my goal, and in blue, Satan did not cause the plan of God to happen. So important. Satan did not cause the plan of God to happen. The plan of God is before the fall, before the snake is even introduced. The snake isn't hanging out with Adam on day one. Adam's doing fine on day one.
Well, isn't the plan before Satan?
Yes. Oh, before Satan? Sure, but it's stated in the book even. It's stated before the snake is introduced. Here's the plan, oneness. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to break that plan. Right? So maybe he does know. I'll break that plan. You're not going to end up with one with him. He's going to end up one with me. Right? He's going to end up one with me. I have Adam on my list. The snake comes in to break the first plan. It's an overt plan.
That makes God really bold right there.
Makes him really bold.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. Even death itself won't break my plan. I will overcome that too. God is not dependent on sin to make the plan happen, right? The gospel is not, here's an important sentence. The gospel is not that Jesus paid for our sin. The good news is, God's plan is that one day we would be one with him. And our sin can't stop it. God will overcome our sin to accomplish the good news. The good news is, God has a plan to be one with you. That's good news. What about my sin? What about my rebellious nature? What about my, oh, yeah, we got that covered. We got that. Go ahead. Bring on the challenges. Let's see if I'm up to it. But here's the good news. I want to be one with you. It's called the marriage supper of the Lamb. Why would it be called that? Is that not Genesis 2? It's the marriage supper of the Lamb. Marriage? Where are you going to go for marriage? You got one verse. You got one verse, and it's Genesis 2. That's good news. We want that. We want the gospel before the fall. Yeah? All right. Anything else on that one? Shadow 1. That's not about marriage primarily. It's about Jesus. Marriage is a shadow of that. All right. What time is it? Ooh, it's already time. Oh, man. All right.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
I get
important.
it now. Now I can see it. Like now, when you were talking about that, and I'm hearing him pray in the garden, it wasn't like he was like. I mean, he was dying for our sin, but the goal was that we would be one with God. Not that he would die for our sin. It was like I'm just seeing it
Yeah.
different. You know, like
It's
he's
totally different.
the will of God is like different than what it took for man to become a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How committed to the
I see
plan
it.
is God?
I see it.
He's willing to die for the plan.
And it's because they
But the
did.
plan's
The church
different.
makes marriage primary for Genesis 2. You know what I mean? Like when they preach it to everybody, because
Oh, yeah.
all the weddings they do and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
you get stuck in your head, and that's where I was at. I was like, what do you mean? I see it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think we're co-opting this text a lot like we did the whole Genesis story, to be honest, so that we're bringing this text and we're making the subject of this text be homosexuality. Like we took all of Genesis 1 and 2 and we forced it to only speak against evolution. And we destroyed the text. We did. We destroyed the text. It's a much more beautiful text than that. It might speak to it a little bit, but it speaks to way more than that. But we co-opted it only to that conversation. Now we're taking Genesis 2, the first statement of the plan of God, to be one with people, and we're just co-opting it, God's against homosexuality. And it kills me. Like, guys, you'll just proof text everywhere, won't you? You'll just take whatever verse you want, speak against an issue, and miss the entire point of that text. And we just make the text look stupid. We make the text so small when we do that. And then it's again, like I said this when we were there. It's not good for man to be alone. God said that with the plan of being one with humanity. Right?
Well, you know, when
The
you
goal
come
is
along-
revelation. We can't have
Yeah.
one male. And we make that verse only about
Yeah.
marriage.
Well, when you talk about it's not good for man to be alone, we're thinking, well, he needs a helpmate or a mate,
Yeah.
as opposed to, if you're alone, you're not with God. So
Yeah.
it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be without God.
And it's
You
not
need
good
to
for
be
man
one
to be
with God.
alone because the goal is to be one with him, right? It's to make more than that. But we apply it to a 40-year-old man who can't find a wife.
Yeah.
And we go, oh,
Or
yeah.
20-year-old women in the church.
Even God doesn't think it's good for you to be alone. Like Paul says, I wish you could all be alone. Because God has given me a gift that I wish you had, and it's aloneness. It's Paul's prayer for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the text is bigger than that. God isn't cherry picking subjects like that and giving us little cute quotes to throw at those people. It's not what the text does. It's bigger and beautiful. Yeah, rules get you to find it down. All right, where I was going, and really, we have to do another class if you want me to teach you this stuff. So there's I don't want you to look through. You turn all your notes back in. So in Genesis it says, in there's gold. There's gold. I want to do one of them. Can I do one of them?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do one of them. It's so amazing. Let me just do onyx. No. Onyx is so good too. Doggone it. Let me do aromatic resin. So there's gold, aromatic resin, and onyx. Don't read your notes. Oh, you're gonna kill me. Okay,
Don't
so,
look at our notes right now.
I don't look now. Well, you can now if you want to, but I mean until next week. There's aromatic resin. There's gold, aromatic resin, and onyx, right? And when I think, I read three things, starting with gold, and then one of them is aromatic resin. I think incense, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That comes to my mind. That's not it at all. It's way cooler than that. What is aromatic resin? What is that?
I was gonna ask you.
No one knows. That's the amazing thing. Nobody knows. Because that word's only in the Bible 2 times. It's only 2 times. This is the second time it's used. It's not the first time. Because the first time it's used is used in Numbers 11. Right? Numbers 11. Numbers 11 is between 12 and 14 months out of Egypt. Moses has not talked to God about Genesis yet. Right? We know, read it, it says, and here we went, and I wrote it down here. We're right in the story still. Moses hasn't gotten a break yet. Israel hasn't divided into anything yet, right? Right here, Numbers 11, Genesis is way out here sometime. So the very first time this word is put in there, it's not from God. It comes out of Moses' mouth. It's weird. Aromatic resin. We don't know what that is. Some people are going to argue it's a plant. Some are going to argue it's a sap. Some are going to argue it's a precious stone. Gold, onyx, and the precious stone. That people argue that. We don't know what it is. It's only in the Bible twice. It's not in the Hebrew language. In other books, we don't know it. Total guess. Numbers 11. What does Numbers 11 say? This is what Numbers 11 says. It's right here on the page 6. If you're looking for a page number, you can look now. Bottom of page 6. Numbers 11:7 says this. The manna. What does manna mean? What is this? It's a word that's just a gathered up word which sounds like, what is this? So they looked and said, what is this? Someone probably slurred it, and then they called it that the whole time. The slurred version of, what is this? What is this? That's what it meant. It's not a name. It's a, let's just call it how we reacted to it the first time. Let's just call it that the whole rest of the time. Okay? The manna was like coriander seed. Coriander seed, that's aromatic, right? And looked like resin. If you read the NIV, if you read the ESV, they're like resin is a guess. So we're not even going to translate the word. They just left it bdellium. Looks like bdellium. What the freak's bdellium? That's the point. No one knows. Nobody. They don't have a guess. They eventually, like if you go to Israel, the Middle East now and go, I need some bdellium, you'll buy some tree resin. Right? So, but that's way late. So some people say, well, maybe that is old, and maybe it looked like resin. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. But here's the point. Numbers chapter 11, manna. It looks like coriander seed. It's white and small. And it also looks like bdellium. Last reference to that word in the whole human race. Now, 20 years later, God is talking to Moses about Genesis and the garden. And he says to Moses, in the garden, there was bdellium. What does Moses think's in the garden? Manna. Thinks manna's in the garden. There's manna in the garden. What is manna? Bdellium. Okay, but how does the Bible talk about manna? Go to page 7. It's crazy. It's crazy. There's a great psalm, I took it out because I had too many pages and too many cross-references. But it's the bread of heaven. Psalm 84, I think it was. It's the bread of heaven. God gave them the bread of heaven. Look what Jesus does in John chapter 6. The only place Jesus is going to use it in... wait till... this is so good. Then they asked him, what must we do to do the works of God that God requires? Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. Right? Believe in me. I'm God's provision. So they asked him, what sign will you give us that we may see it and believe in you? But he's already done so much, right? This is a ridiculous question on their part by this point. What will you do? Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, as it's written, he gave them bread from heaven. That is a quote from Psalm 84, right? It's the bread from heaven. Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it's not Moses who has given you bread from heaven, but it's my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, that's the bread we want. Jesus declared, that's me. I'm the bread. I'm the bdellium. Jesus is in the garden before the fall. Because the gospel's in there before the fall. Now, you want to know something crazy? Numbers 11, where Moses calls it bdellium, which links it to the garden, and it's manna, which links it to Jesus, so it's right back. It's not the first time manna's ever talked about. It's the only time bdellium's ever mentioned. Manna's been here since here. They get out the Exodus, they're running, manna, God gives them manna right away. Right? Gives them manna right away. They get to Mount Sinai, they're eating manna. They leave Mount Sinai, they're eating manna. By Numbers 11, what story is that? It's not where they get manna. That's not where it's called bdellium.
Is that where they reject manna?
They're rejecting manna in this story. They're rejecting it.
That's why it's in the ark.
It's why it's in the ark. Oh, it's so good. The context of Numbers 11, where Moses refers to it and links it to the garden so that Jesus can be linked to the garden and to manna, is that it's the story where they are rejecting it and then God dumps tons of quail on them, and it finishes like this. Did I put it in there? Yeah. Go back to the bottom of page 6. This is how that story ends. But while the meat was still between their teeth and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people and struck them with a severe plague. Therefore, the place was named whatever, because there they buried the people who craved other food. There is where the people died who rejected the provision of God, manna. Jesus in John chapter 6 is going to quote this passage, and it's the same passage where they're rejecting Jesus. They're rejecting the manna, and they're going for other gods. And Jesus is going to say, no, I'm the manna. You should read Numbers 11 because you're screwed. Because you're screwed. When we take gold, I'll tell you right now what it is. Gold inside the tabernacle, because Eden is the temple of God. Gold inside the temple of God is always the divinity of Jesus. It's always, right? Read any commentary. The ark is made of wood covered in gold. The wood is his flesh. He was human, but he was also divine, right? This is how it all is. But that's all plated, gold plated. Everything is gold plated.
Not the mercy seat.
Not the mercy seat, and not the candlestick. They're good gold. They're pure gold. They are solid gold. The light of the world, John chapter 1. I want to teach it all night long. John chapter 1, I'm the light that gives life. We did this when we talked about the tree of life, right? The candlestick, solid gold. And the mercy seat, Romans 3. He is the hilasterion. He is the atonement cover. He is the mercy seat for us. God presented Jesus. Those two things are only the divinity of Christ. He is the light that brings light, and it is the work of God himself who would bring our forgiveness. In the garden there is good gold. What is good gold? What's bad gold?
Yeah.
What's pure gold as opposed to?
Solid gold as opposed to gold plated, right? Right? What? This is gold in the temple. It's all Jesus. But what's the best gold? The lampstand and the mercy seat. Then you go to manna. Then you go to manna, that one. And then you go to onyx. Look at onyx. This is real short. Exodus 28. This is Exodus 28. Moses is on Mount Sinai still. The golden calf's 32. He's still on Mount Sinai, and here's what he hears about onyx. Take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the son of Israel in the order of their birth, 6 names on one stone and remaining 6 on the other. Engrave the names of the son of Israel on the 2 stones the way a gem cutter engraves a seal. Then mount the stones in gold filigree settings, and fasten them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod. The ephod is what the high priest wears when he goes in front of God. And he has the names of Israel here. And on there's golden rings, and he wears a chest piece where it has 12 precious stones. Each has the name, and here's what it says. And fasten them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod as memorial stones for the sons of Israel. Aaron is to bear the names on his shoulders as a memorial. The high priest bears the weight of the people of God when he enters the holy place to stand before the mercy seat. In there, you have the work of Christ as the mercy seat and the light of God. You have the provision of God, manna, and you have onyx. What is in the temple of God, the very first temple of Eden, is everything needed. Not only do we have the gospel, here's the plan. I have everything needed. I have the work of God. The work of God. That's the mercy seat and the light. I have the work of God and the provision of God to bear the weight of the people of God. Is already in Eden. I have the work of God and the provision of God to do the work of God in Eden. Because to accomplish the plan of God. It's outrageous. But you would expect that. You would want that. You would want that. You would want it. Why those 3 things? Why is Balaam twice? You can't miss it. You can't miss it. There's only one other place. It's manna. And Moses says that word first. So God goes, oh, well, I'm going to call it Bdelem, because you're the one who named it Bdelem. What did you name Bdelem? Manna. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that's in the garden. Why? Because I need you to know what I'm talking about. It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
So Adam would have been eating manna.
Not necessarily. No, he would have been eating fruit. Adam would have ignored it.
But it was just there.
But it might mean Jesus. It might not mean actual man at all.
Oh, okay.
Here's the cool verse I did with onyx. Here's an idea. Alan came up to me and said, why onyx, though? What did you tell me about onyx?
It's an agate, it's like glass, sand. It's chemically, it's hard to distinguish from other agates.
And where is it?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's he's like, Bruce, onyx is everywhere. It's not special at all. It looks like a rock.
Like glass.
It looks like a rock. It comes in other colors, but yeah, if you polish it up, it's fine. But it's everywhere. It's totally a common stone. But it's for carrying the weight of the people. And so, the cross-reference I put there was Isaiah 53. He had no beauty or majesty that we should be attracted to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Onyx. But he was pierced for our transgression. He was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that brought us peace was on him. He was totally common, totally unbeautiful. But he was the plan of God to bear the weight for your sin. He's onyx. It's the perfect stone, not diamond. Because then Jesus would have had to have been beautiful. It's Jesus. It has to be common. It has to be. Why? Because you're not going to go to Jesus because he's beautiful. You're going to go to him because he's beautiful.
Quick question,
What?
so do you think Jesus would have been in